Welcome to the DMI Member Showcase. Today I am delighted to be joined by Kamran Awan. Kamran is a DMI member and he has recently undertaken the DMI Pro and successfully certified with us. Kamran is a co-founder of iOB Business, which is a franchise organisation that helps people launch a digital agency. So thanks for joining me today, Kamran.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me, to be honest.
No, it's great to have you here. And to kick things off, what I'd love to start the interview off with is just hearing a little bit about you, your career and your background.
Sure, no problem. So my name's Kamran. I'm 36 from Leicester, born and raised here in Leicester. Not really famous for anything apart from Walker's Crisp and Gary Lineker, if you're a football fan. A little bit about my career. I actually graduated back in 2006 from the world-class Loughborough University Business School in accounting and financial management. I then went on to work for a couple of big top 4 accounting firms. Realized probably after about 5 or 6 years that looking at spreadsheets and kind of dealing with numbers for the next 30 or 40 years probably wasn't really going to be my cup of tea. So as with most things in life, I kind of just pivoted and started going into digital marketing, technology, franchising. Fast forward to the last 3 years, and I've been running my own marketing franchise, a technology business called iOB Business.
Fantastic, Kamran. And as I mentioned in the introduction, you have recently certified with DMI. But up until then, you had really built up your knowledge and skill and in digital marketing just on the job and self-teaching. So can you tell me a little bit about when that interest in digital marketing first appeared and what about it specifically appealed to you as well?
Sure. So with digital marketing, I've always kind of had an interest in marketing and technology. I think I really got into it back in probably around 2009 and 10, where I started using social media a lot, and in particular Facebook. And what I actually found was, as a kind of side business, I was selling t-shirts on Shopify, similar stores to Shopify, drop shipping. So I think that the one at the time was called Teespring. And one of the best ways to actually get lots of eyeballs onto your products was through advertising. So I started posting organically on Facebook. I started dabbling a little bit into Facebook advertising, and that really stemmed my interest because I actually realized you could connect with people all over the world relatively quickly, and it was about using technology to actually almost build an awareness for what you're actually doing. So that kind of stemmed my initial interest.
I think actually a good few other members are involved in drop shipping as well. So maybe just if you could talk to me a little bit about that process and how you found it and what intrigued you about drop shipping in the first place.
Yeah, so I'm quite analytical and research heavy kind of person. So before I kind of got into it, I watched a lot of webinars. I followed a lot of people online. I think one in particular by the name of Chris Blair, who's really big when it comes to e-com. And what I actually found with dropshipping was it actually reduces the risk because you don't need to hold a lot of stock, well, zero stock to be fair, and you can basically have the product shipped directly from the manufacturer straight to the end customer. So I attended a lot of webinars, I did a lot of reading, a lot of research, and there's a lot of dropshipping websites out there. I think back then the real focus was on China, so you had AliExpress and similar sites. I think over the last probably 5 or 6 years, a lot of people are now looking more closer to home in the US or the UK to kind of fulfill their product needs. But that kind of stemmed my interest in kind of the drop shipping side of things.
And I think, Kamran, what is very clear is that you're a very motivated person, but I suppose what actually drives you, what specifically motivates you to keep changing, keep progressing, keep evolving?
I think it's about self-development and also to a degree helping others. I think a lot of people go into business for the money, the fame, the flexibility, the power. And don't get me wrong, all of those things are great when you're looking to start a business. But in my opinion, they're byproducts of being successful. Ultimately, if you can actually do something you enjoy, you have a passion, and you can help people as well, that in itself is more motivational, because a lot of material things like money, for example, that comes and goes, but actually helping someone, making a difference, and hopefully leaving a legacy is something which really motivates me.
Would you describe yourself then as a people person then, or a people pleaser even?
I think just by nature, I'm quite a talkative, quite an extrovert character. So with that being said, I think I am kind of a people person. It's probably one of the reasons why I moved away from accounting all those years ago, because seeing the same faces, doing the same work, looking at the same programs all day long just wasn't for me. And I think from my point of view, starting iOB business a few years ago, that's also been a really, really good I would say platform and vehicle for me to actually talk to lots of people and kind of get that message across as well.
Great. And I suppose I find myself the best way of becoming informed is hearing from other people, their life experiences, and what's kind of helped frame them as well. So that's the whole reason why we're doing it today as well. So going back to your career, how do you feel that your perspectives and goals have changed as your career has evolved?
I think they've changed massively, because when I graduated back in 2006 as a 22-year-old, my goal and focus was to become kind of a finance and accounting professional. And then as the kind of years grow and you become more mature and more aware about the different options, you kind of realize that there's more to life than what you thought you wanted at 18 when you actually went to university. So I think over the years, my goals have actually changed in the sense that I've actually looked at a long-term plan for what I want to achieve. And it's quite interesting because people often view themselves in, I would say they look at themselves and then they compare themselves to others. And in most cases, there is a little bit of envy, disappointment, maybe trying to match what others are doing. The one thing I always focus on is actually taking care of my own journey, whatever that may be, rather than kind of looking at others as well, because ultimately the one thing you can control is your own personal development. And if you're not setting testing goals for yourself, you're not really progressing. One book I read quite recently, actually, by Grant Cardone, called The 10X Rule, was all about the difference between success and failure, and actually setting yourself quite testing targets, which for a lot of people might not be realistic. But half of the time with any kind of target, the thrill is not in achieving that target, it's the actual process of trying to get there. And I think that kind of has a lot of synergy with running your own business as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. You know, I think the person that is most invested in your career is you. So,
Absolutely. I often get friends saying to me, you think quite highly of yourself. And I say, well, if I don't blow my own trumpet and believe in myself, how do I expect others to do that? So it all starts from within, and then you project that outwards. So I think reading, listening, making sure you've got a passion for developing yourself is crucial. And I think with today's day and age, with so many distractions, whether you've got Netflix, social media, sometimes it's good just to switch off, read a book, listen to a podcast, and just focus on yourself and actually think about where you'd like to take your career as well.
yeah, and I think it's actually such an interesting point, particularly, and funny enough, Cameron, I know I'm going off topic a little bit here, but we actually did spoke to some recruiters recently and are doing a podcast on it. But one of the things that came up was actually imposter syndrome. And whenever I was looking into it, you know, it tends to be particularly females that write about it and talk about it. But I suppose it was a bit of a trending thing for a while, where people were felt that it was okay to admit that that you know they were just secure in the position that as maybe what energy they were giving off. But I often wonder, was there a disadvantage in that as well? You know, going back to your point of you need to project what you want others to see in you, and if you're projecting self-doubt, then would that also cause people to doubt you as well?
Absolutely. And I speak to a lot of people, Caroline, with iOB business. And one thing you actually realize is there's a lot of people out there, probably the viewers of this as well, thinking, especially with everything that's going on right now with the global situation, almost at crossroads in terms of what do they do with their lives. Do they find a new job, for example? In some cases, they're forced to because of redundancy. Do they start a new business? And there's a lot of intrinsic self-doubts. Naturally, the environment has now put us in that situation. But I think from my perspective, the one piece of advice I'd always give people is evaluate your own skill set and actually realize what your goals and aspirations are. If you're happy working for someone, and there's nothing wrong with that at all, I've done it in the past as well. Just make sure you're still developing yourself so you can progress in your career. If you're looking to go down the route of a business, well, follow your passion, but also make sure that passion is worthwhile and something you can execute on. But ultimately, you need to take responsibility for yourself, because once you kind of go to the big bad world, no one's going to take care of you and no one's going to look after your career unless you make that first move. And that could be doing a course, it could be reading a book, it could be attending university, whatever it may be. You just need to find that passion and that focus for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be a bit of trial and error as well. And that's not a bad thing either.
It is, to be honest with you. There's probably, I'd say, probably under 1% of people who are successful that have been successful all the way through. For the other 99% of people that are successful, they've had ups and downs in their career. I've had ups and downs in my career as well. I've gone into jobs which maybe weren't quite right for me. I've made certain decisions, for example, that probably in hindsight I wouldn't have made. But I think that's all character building, because ultimately each negative or bad experience you have actually shapes you moving forward, and then it allows you to actually make sure you're not making that same mistake again.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a nice point to actually ask you about some of the standout moments that you've had in your career as well. What springs to mind?
Probably two, to be honest with you. One quite a few years ago, and one more recently. So if I take the one quite a few years ago, it was actually landing my first graduate job after university, because there's a lot of pressure once you've been to university. You kind of graduate, there's a lot of debt hanging over your head, and to actually get a really good accounting job is quite difficult, because it is a quite competitive space. So going through the interview processes, going through the assessment days, completing case studies, being interviewed by really senior partners in top 4 accounting firms. For someone who comes from a humble background like myself, that was a really big achievement, because I actually thought on my merit I've now secured a really good job. So that was something I was proud of, and I know my family was proud of that as well. And then the second standout moment is probably going into launching iOB business full time. And that first day where you sit in the office, you sit in front of your computer, and you think, right, now I'm in business, what do I do next? Because when you're in a job, you kind of have a boss, a supervisor, colleagues, and you kind of have a structure to your day. But when you're your own boss, it is really empowering, because you can make all the decisions. But then a small part of you actually thinks, okay, now what do I do? And that kind of first moment where I set my first email, I set up our first marketing campaign, those are kind of moments that will stay with me forever, because that's kind of where I arrived in terms of actually meeting my aspirations, which was to be a successful business owner.
I suppose you've started a few businesses now, between the drop shipping and now iOB business. So I suppose, do you think that to be an entrepreneur, that people are born with that sort of spirit, or is it something that they can learn and develop? Do you need to have it just almost ingrained area, or can you take a leap of faith and make it work?
I think both, to be honest with you. I think there's certain individuals that are kind of born to be business owners. From my point of view, to be honest, right from the outset, I kind of always wanted to be my own boss. I kind of hated the idea of someone telling me, this is what you need to do, this is how you do it, this is when you can take your holidays, this is how much you're going to get paid, so on and so forth. And I wouldn't say I was a rebel, but I always kind of had that doubt in my head that I'd actually like to stand on my own 2 feet. For others, I think it's a lot more taking a leap of faith. But when someone takes a leap of faith, I think you need to take a calculated risk or a calculated gamble. If you're in a good job, for example, and then you have this idea, I want to start a business, There's no point just quitting your job and just now researching what business to go into. A business takes a lot of time to think about, to develop, but ultimately anyone can start a business, because if you look at every single business out there, there is a structure and a process behind that business. So as long as you can learn that process and that structure, and that comes through research, time, experience, you can get there. So I think it's a bit of both. I think the most important thing is actually do something which you enjoy, whether it's a job, whether it's your business. You need to actually ultimately enjoy that, because you spend upwards of 35, 40 hours in a job, probably upwards of 55, 60 hours if it's your own business. If you're not doing something you enjoy, then that's a recipe for disaster.
So, Cameron, I suppose we're talking about setting up businesses here, and you obviously founded a business that helps people establish a digital agency. So can you tell me a little bit about how that works and how you support people getting their new business off the ground?
Sure, absolutely. So with iOB Business, essentially there's two focuses. Number one is on helping our partners or franchisees develop their own digital agency. And then secondly, and equally as important, is actually helping our partners work with local businesses to actually use technology and marketing solutions. And that's something which has really been amplified with the current pandemic situation, how all types of SMEs, whether you're a restaurant, a gym, a hotel, or a bar, you all need to be connecting with customers online, because you and I as consumers are spending on average, I think I read a recent report, about 5 hours per day online. So how we actually support our partners is through the technology platforms that we've developed ourselves. So what tends to happen in the technology franchising landscape generally, certainly here in the UK, is a lot of companies go to US or India, for example, and they rent or white label software. What we actually did a few years ago was actually develop our own tech platforms in-house. That gives us a lot more control in terms of how we modify and evolve the software, whether it's a review system, an ordering system, social media management. So tech is kind of a key focus. But aside from that, we fundamentally understand the challenges that a lot of people face when they're launching a new business. That's why we've got a complete program in place, from training to business coaching to lots of resources to branding. So you basically get everything you need to set up your digital agency within a couple of days. And then you can basically go out and work with local businesses and provide these solutions for them as a kind of managed for you service.
And just out of curiosity, Cameron, I'm wondering now with everything that's happened and during COVID, have you had a lot of small to medium-sized businesses that weren't digitally focused, even reaching out for advice or guidance on how to set themselves up or convert to a digital business?
Absolutely. I mean, what we've actually seen as a company is over the last probably, I'd say, 8 or 9 months, we've had over 400% growth as a company. And that's principally down to business owners now understanding that technology is paramount to the success of their business. I think what's actually happened, and I read a report about this recently as well, is the whole technology stroke marketing landscape has now shifted forward about 2 years. Because if you look at your average business back in January, for them to invest in an updated website or in an ordering system was probably a nice to have rather than necessity. I think fast forward now, and a lot of business owners understand if they're not connecting with their customers on their website, on social media, on review sites, for example, they're losing revenue. So we've had a lot of businesses that kind of reached out to us. What we've tried to do as a company as well is put out a lot of content to actually help people. So whether that's a weekly blog, we started twice a month webinars. There's a real focus on actually giving something back, because ultimately SMEs are kind of the fabric of our communities all over the world. And I think it's a dangerous time for a lot of SMEs to kind of how they bounce forward, but it's also exciting as well.
Yeah, and actually my next question to you was going to be, did you find your own business strategy changed amid the kind of COVID landscape? But is that how it's evolved and changed, is just that mentality of giving back more to your clients and sharing more information through content and through webinars?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we're in quite a lucky position in the sense that our core focus is on technology and marketing as a whole, and to a degree that's an evergreen industry, because if you look at us as consumers, we're using more and more technology, whether it's using our phones, whether it's email, social media, and we're not going to go back to a manual system ever again. So we were quite well placed, to be honest, even when COVID kind of started. But what we have done in the last few months is certainly develop more content, more processes, and generally just provide guidance, because as a small business owner, what we've actually found with a lot of end clients is, to a degree, they're accidental business owners. And that might sound a bit counterintuitive to say, but if you think about your local accountant or your local law firm or restaurant, the chances are that business owner was a really good cook if he was a restaurant owner. So he built a business around that, i.e. a restaurant. An accountant may be qualified with a company, thought I could strike it out alone, and they've set up their own accountancy firm. So they've got a real skill in what they do, which is their core activity. But when it comes to digital marketing, engaging customers online, that's kind of a completely different skill set for them. And it's about companies like us going out there and actually helping these businesses through our partner network.
Excellent. Yeah, I definitely think that there is a bit of an upskilling need and requirement and real desire amongst people and small to medium-sized enterprises to start digitizing. Do you think, you mentioned it there, but do you think the landscape really has changed off the back of 2020 and that those changes are going to affect the landscape going forward, that we're not going to roll back, that's those kind of changes are embedded now?
Absolutely. I think we've kind of gone into I would say a seminal moment, because what's actually happened now is, and we've heard this in the news as well, there's a lot of talk about business transformation. There's a lot of technology grants for a lot of businesses, because institutions, governments, society as a whole, and most importantly, business owners now understand that going back to kind of 2019, early 2020 is not really a reality. We've now got a new normal that we'll all start to adjust to. So I think what's actually going to happen now is more and more businesses are going to realize that the online and digital experience they provide to their customers is just as important, if not more important, than the physical experience they actually provide. And I think that's where investing in your website, social media, SEO, for example, can really provide dividends to local businesses.
And if you were speaking to a small to medium-sized business owner that wasn't familiar with digital marketing or selling and wanted to digitize, what would be, I suppose, a couple of your top areas that you would recommend that they focus on?
First and foremost, I'd tell any business owner to keep things quite simple, because what tends to happen with digital marketing as a whole, and we've seen this in the industry ourselves, is when you go and speak to business owners, it can almost become paralysis by analysis. They've got all of these different options, and what do you focus on as a business owner? I would always say start with your website, because that's something you can control, and that kind of is your digital shop window for your business. I'd also focus on social media, purely because half of the world's global population are on social media networks. And then I'd always focus on producing content to actually help you on the SEO side of things. So if you focus on those three things, website, SEO, and social media, that'll be a really, really good platform and starting point for you to hopefully start engaging digitally with your audience.
Yeah, and I suppose recognizing where your clients are, what social platforms your clients are actually on as well. Like, there's no point you being on TikTok if you're I don't know. Maybe a butcher or an accountant could make TikTok work.
Well, to be honest with you, I'm not sure how kind of clued up you are on TikTok and social in general, but there's a really famous restaurant. I think it started in Turkey, Salt Bay. I'm not sure if you've seen Salt Bay.
No, I haven't, and I get lost in TikTok. I go on for 5 minutes and find myself there 15, 20 minutes later.
Your viewers would probably know who Salt Bay is. He's really big on Instagram and Facebook, and he does these weird kind of knife actions with meat, and he's got restaurants in Dubai, in London, and I think someone like him could do quite well on TikTok. I'm sure he's probably already on it, to be fair, but yeah, I think what's happened with all these social networks is they've kind of carved a little niche for themselves. But you're absolutely right. I think as a business, if you can identify your client persona, kind of work out who they are, what they like, where they hang out, and then focus content on that. I think that's always a good starting point.
That's great advice, because it can be quite a scary endeavor for those that are just starting out and don't really know what to focus on first. So we looked at the challenges that small to medium-sized business owners might have, but what do you think now that the landscape has changed, that are going to be the challenges that digital marketers face going forward?
I think what we're finding as digital marketers as a whole is our customers, or our customer base, is becoming increasingly more savvy, and they're getting bombarded with lots of messages. So it's about how do you actually stand out in the digital marketing strategies that you develop. I think one thing we're really focused on as a company, and something we advise all of our partners to do with their clients as well, is actually provide a multi-channel experience to customers. And I think that's where a lot of marketers will hopefully have their focus, because if you just focus on one touch point, let's say you look at email marketing as an example, and that's all you're doing to drive your client's business forward, you're almost putting all of your eggs in one basket. And that's never a good thing in marketing. It's never a good thing in business. So what we kind of propose and what we kind of see is providing that multi-channel experience. So engaging people on social media, engaging people through remarketing, for example, engaging people on SEO. So putting all of these different touch points together and kind of building up that perception, I think that's when you can deliver really successful campaigns for your clients as well.
Great advice. And on the subject of advice, what has been the most valuable advice that you've ever been given?
I've been given a lot of advice over the years. A lot of it is kind of I've taken, it's gone in one ear, out the other, because I'm just that kind of person. But one thing that actually did stick with me was when I was at university, we were coming up towards the graduation. It was kind of the final semester. And one of the lecturers was talking about how to actually apply academic theory into kind of the practical workplace environment. And one thing that really struck me in that seminar was he talked about how our careers were really focused around being a marathon rather than a sprint. Now, as a society, you're kind of conditioned to a degree to kind of follow a certain path. So graduate, for example, get a good job, mortgage, partner, kids, retirement, death. That's kind of the structure of what society hopes most people do, rightly or wrongly. And what you actually find is people then compare themselves to others. And I think what's happened with social media as well is people go on Instagram and they see influencers and they think, look, these people are similar age to us, they've achieved this, and they kind of feel a sense of disappointment themselves. But what I took from that lecture and that seminar was life is, and your career is, a marathon and not a sprint. If you think about yourself as an early 20-year-old, you've got around 35 or 40 years, with all things being equal, to actually carve out your career, whether that's in business or in a corporate environment. That's a hell of a long time to actually focus on developing yourself. So don't think just because you're in your 30s, for example, and you haven't achieved what your family or your peers have done, that life's over, because you can pivot at any given point. I think a good example of that is myself. I pivoted after 5, 6, 7 years, going into something totally different. And I'm nothing special, if I'm honest with you. If I can do it, anyone can do it. It's just about focusing and making sure you have that inner drive to actually achieve what your goals are.
Kamran, I love that sentiment, and I think we're wrapping up the interview now. But before we do, I always ask one final question, which has led to some interesting answers in the past. But can you tell me an interesting fact about yourself that I wouldn't see on your resume or your professional biography, or wouldn't naturally come up in our first conversation?
Yeah, sure. So probably my interesting fact, I've been asked this question a few times, principally probably in interview situations where a lot of people give quite, I would say, corporate answers. My kind of claim to fame or interesting fact is I actually share my birthday with Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator. And something else that I've recently kind of come across is Henry Ford the great industrialist, also shares the same birthday as me. So I'm not sure whether it was written in the stars that I was going to develop my own business as well. But again, those are two things you probably wouldn't see on my LinkedIn profile, but hopefully now you know.
And do you channel Arnold Schwarzenegger then whenever you're in the gym?
Not really, to be honest. I mean, I think with most people at the moment, with the lockdown situation that's just gone, I've actually packed on the pounds. But as with most things, Caroline, the New Year's have had to start. New Year's resolutions, I'm guessing for 95% of people out there, is to get fit, get healthy. I'm going to be one of those 95. But check back with me in a year to kind of see if there's been any change or not.
Well, we all started COVID so well.
Exactly.
Not
Exactly.
exiting it with the same level of determination for fitness goals and healthy eating. But listen, Cameron, it was an absolute pleasure catching up with you today. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you very much for the insights and some of the advice and guidance that you've shared today. And continued success with iOB business. And we look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thanks a lot. Look after yourself. Take care.